I'm going to be walking you through the setup steps for your very first drop spindle spinning project. So we have our drop spindle, we have attached our leader. So the leader is just a strand of commercially spun yarn. I prefer to use an animal yarn, so this is 100% alpaca, just because there's a little bit, and you can kind of see it up close, there's a little bit of sort of hairiness to those natural animal fibers that are going to want to really grab a hold of the fiber that you're trying to spin, and make them stick together just a little bit better. So your kit, if you've purchased it from us, or you can easily do this at home, will already go ahead and have the leader tied to it and just use a basic knot and tie it right up there up against the whorl of your spindle. And you are going to bring that leader up and across the whorl. Some whorls will have this little notch. If yours does, go through the notch. If yours does not, that's fine. You can just come up and over the side of the spindle. It works just fine. Up and over the side of the spindle and then through the hook. So I like to go through, kind of just lay it across and then do a full rotation after that. As long as your spindle will sort of rest on that yarn without slipping through, you've done it the right way. So once we have our leader set up correctly, we are then going to practice just spinning with your leader. And so I would recommend you've got your leader is going to extend a couple of inches past your drop spindle. I'm going to recommend, before you get fiber involved in this at all, go ahead and just twist your spindle and see how long you can get it to rotate on just that leader. So you are just practicing, how do I take my hands on this shaft and rotate them to get the shaft of my spindle, and so my whole spindle, to spin for a long period of time. That is probably the hardest skill for a lot of people, is to just let that spin happen. So give it a couple of practices here with just your leader, no fiber involved. Generally, when you are using a drop spindle, you are going to be rotating the drop spindle clockwise. So when you're turning a drop spindle, you can either turn it one direction or you can turn it the other direction. Generally, when you're spinning a singles, which is what we're spinning, you're turning the fiber into one strand of yarn on a drop spindle. You are going to be rotating your drop spindle clockwise. Now, if you, like me, have a hard time figuring out which way that is, I have certainly seen people put a little piece of tape on their spindle with an arrow on it to show which way you want to go. It doesn't matter if you prefer clockwise or counterclockwise. Either one will work just fine, but you need to be consistent. You need to spin your entire batch of singles yarn going in one of those two directions. So that's why it doesn't so much matter which way you go, although clockwise is more standard. Do make sure that when you're practicing, you are going the same way each time. So just spin it and see how long it will go before you stop it with your hands. And obviously, once you've done that, you've got a lot of twist here in your leader. So that's really, really twisted up. If you let go of that leader, you'll let that twist out, and then you can practice that again. So once you feel like, okay, I've gotten twist going, I let it go as long as I can to practice, and then I stop it with my hand. That's the skill that you're trying to get here. And also just kind of holding these things in your hand and figuring out, do you want to hold the yarn in your left hand and the spindle in your right, or vice versa? And everybody's going to be a little bit different, so just see what makes the most sense to you. So once you've done that, you've got your leader through the hook, you've practiced spinning on that just a little bit. Now we're going to get our fiber involved. And so you're going to take the fiber, and I would highly recommend working with well-prepared fiber the first time. This means this is not the time to practice preparing your own fiber. If you want to do that, that's great, but learn to spin on something that has already been prepared so that it drafts apart well. So drafting truly just means pulling your fiber apart a little bit. So when you draft, you don't want to pull it all the way so that it comes apart. Although if you do, it's not a big deal. You just overlap it and look, it's connected again. But drafting means you're pulling it to kind of the thickness that you want your yarn to be. And as you put twist in there, it's going to thin out a little bit. But pulling your fiber, just like I'm doing, to get get it to be the thickness that you want your yarn to be. So I like to work with a small amount of fiber, especially when you're just starting off. So I don't think working with just a huge handful is going to do you any favors. It's a little bit easier to manage if you work with a smaller amount. So you've got your smaller amount, you've got it drafted apart, and I'm just going to draft it just a little bit more. So just pull, I'll do this super close so you can see. As I just pull gently, you'll see those fibers, my hands get farther apart, and your fibers just pull, that fiber bunch in your hand gets thinner and thinner. So once you've done a little bit of that, you want to get a few inches here, and you just want to, just with your finger, twist just a few little inches here, and then overlap that with your leader. So you take your leader here, and I'm going to put those 4 inches or so that I just pulled apart of my fiber, and it's still connected to the rest of this batch. I'm going to overlap that with my leader, and again going the same direction, I am going to take my spindle and just twist the spindle with my hand. And I've got, my hand is holding on to the end of the leader, so this pink string that I've got is actually in my finger here, and that green fiber that I'm drafting is also in my hand there. So you can see these have started to incorporate with each other, and the more I twist my spindle, the more those are going to incorporate and kind of get into the same thing. So my fiber and my leader are now connected. And now you can do the practice that you have just done and spin your drop spindle and see how long you can let that drop spindle spin with your little bit longer yarn attached there. And that is going to be how we attach the yarn to the spindle, or attach our fiber to our spindle. So at this point now you've got a little bit of yarn made, and it's made around that leader. You can see right here at the end, here is the very end of my leader, and it goes right into that fiber there. And so that is the setup. We've got our leader all situated, we've got our fiber attached to it. That's going to be the setup right before you get started spinning.